Thank you. Please be seated. We'll go on the record in the matter of State of Utah versus Martin MacNeill. Mr. MacNeill is present. The state's attorneys are present. Defense counsel are present. Will you approach counsel? Further before the jury comes in. Very good. Let's have a Thank you. Please be seated. We'll go back on the record in the matter of State of Utah versus Martin MacNeill. Mr. MacNeill is present with his counsel. The state's attorneys are also present. You may call your next witness.
Your Honor, the state calls Angela Aguilar. I believe I neglected to move to admit exhibit number 17.
Any objection?
No objection.
17 is received. Ms. Aguilar, if you'll come up here to the clerk's desk, please raise your right hand and take an oath. Thank you. Could you be seated here and respond to council's questions?
Good morning.
Morning.
Will you state your name and spell it for the record, please?
Yes, it's Angie Aguilar, Aguilar.
Thank you. Do you know the MacNeill family?
I do.
How do you know them?
They lived in my neighborhood,
What neighborhood is that?
Creekside in Pleasant Grove.
All right. Do you live there still?
I do.
Okay. Will you describe the location of your house in relation to the MacNeills?
I am across the park, a little diagonal.
Okay. And will you describe the neighborhood just briefly?
Yes, there is a large five-acre park in the center and the homes surround it. So it's a big circle.
When it comes to direction, you said you're across the park. Which way is that? From?
I'm on the west. The MacNeills were on the east.
Okay. Did you associate much with the MacNeills
No,
when they lived there? Do you recall, well, let me ask, when did you move into the neighborhood?
2002.
Okay, do you recall when the MacNeills moved in?
Maybe 2005. I'm not sure.
Okay. Let me go back and ask you whether you associated much with them, with the MacNeills. Did you associate much with Martin and Michelle?
What type of association?
Any type.
Hellos, exchange of pleasantries is about it.
Okay, as neighbors.
Yes,
Did you go to the same church as them?
yes.
And just briefly, what church is that?
The LDS church,
Okay. And were you in the same congregation?
yes.
Do you recall what Martin did in that congregation?
He taught Sunday school.
All right. Did you attend his classes?
I did.
Do you see Martin MacNeill here today?
I do.
Will you point him out, please?
Right there.
Your Honor, may the record reflect that she indicated the defendant.
Do you stipulate?
Yes.
The record will so reflect. Go ahead.
Thank you. Have you kept in touch with any of the MacNeills since 2007?
I have not.
Before Michelle's death, did you ever hear Martin talk about his health?
Yes.
In what context?
He said
I
he...
object, Your Honor, as to relevance, and this is improper character evidence. In terms of what I expect her to say.
Should we approach, Your Honor, or would you like
Please.
to?
Based on the bench conference, I will sustain the objection in part and overrule it in part. You may proceed.
Thank you. I'll restate my question because I'm not even sure what I asked at this point. Did Martin ever discuss his health in your hearing before Michelle's death?
He he taught a lesson in which he expressed his deteriorating health in a Sunday school class.
In relation to Michelle's death, when was that?
I can't be exactly sure, maybe a month or two.
Okay. And do you recall what he told the class?
That he had cancer, and that he was preparing Michelle to take over the financials. And it was a very heartfelt, tearful lesson, and the family was there as well, and tearful.
When you say the family, are you talking about the
Michelle was there, and his older children were there for that lesson.
Okay. Did you know his older children?
Not personally, but they came enough that I knew who they were,
Okay.
and I sat behind them during this lesson.
Okay. Let's talk a couple of months before Michelle's death. Do you recall Martin's asking you a favor?
I do.
What did he ask you?
He asked me to ask some neighbors of ours that lived a couple of doors to the north of him. They were not staying there at the time. He played pro baseball, and asked if they needed a house sitter. That he had a gal that worked with him at the developmental center that was going to school to be a nurse, quiet, and needed somewhere close by to stay.
Okay. Did you follow up on that request?
I did.
Was that request honored?
No, they declined the request.
Okay. Do you recall the events at the MacNeill house on April 11th, 2007?
I do.
Between the hours of 11 and noon that morning, do you recall what you were doing?
Yes.
What was that?
I was visiting with another neighbor at the Daniels home.
Okay. Were there any children with you?
Yes.
Do you recall their first names?
My daughter Chloe, another little girl named Melissa, and Daxton.
Okay. Was your visit interrupted?
Yes.
What happened?
There was a knock on the door. We were kind of getting ready to go, so when the knock came, I started to get up and get shoes on and get kids' shoes on, and Christy came back, and I ran with Christy. She said that the MacNeills needed help.
Okay, I'd like to ask you a little more detail about that. Do you recall what time your visit started that morning at the Daniels?
Sometime after 11,
Okay. Do you recall how long it was?
probably maybe how long the meeting was or how long after 11.
How long your visit was?
Probably about a half an hour.
Okay. When you heard the knock at the door, were you able to see the door
No,
from where you were?
no,
And which door was knocked on?
the front door.
Were you able to see who answered the door?
Christy did.
And were you able to see who it was that was knocking?
Yes. I had gotten up to start getting kids out, and I had seen Ada and Christy go out the door.
Okay, and who is Ada?
Ada is the MacNeill's youngest daughter.
Okay. Did you hear what Ada said?
My dad needs help.
You offering it for its truth?
No, Your Honor, I'm offering it to explain the subsequent actions of Ms. Aguilar and Mrs. Daniels.
Overruled, it will be received for its effect on this witness. Go ahead.
You were saying what you heard Ada say?
My dad needs help.
Okay. Could you see Ada at this point? I think.
Just enough to notice what she was wearing,
Okay, and what was she wearing?
her school uniform.
Do you recall Ada's demeanor?
She was very calm.
Okay. Did you see what Christy did?
Christy went with her and came back immediately,
What were you doing while Christy was gone?
putting shoes on kids.
Okay. You say come back, and Christy came back immediately. Would you estimate about how long you thought she was gone?
A minute or two. It wasn't very long.
Okay. Did Christy ever return to the MacNeills?
Yes.
How long was she at her house after she had returned from the MacNeills the first time? How long was she there before she went back to the MacNeills?
At her home?
Yeah.
It was immediate.
Okay.
She grabbed me, the other friend that was with us watched the children, and I ran over with Christy.
Okay. And about how long would you say it took you to run over?
Seconds.
What route did you, or what path did you take between Christy's house and the MacNeills?
She had a sidewalk and a front walk. We took the sidewalk right over to their front door.
What door from the Daniels house did you leave?
Front door.
Okay, and then you took a sidewalk.
She has a side, up top, a sidewalk that they share a driveway.
Okay.
She had a sidewalk that was up near there, and we just took that and over across the driveway and onto their front sidewalk, or, their walk, and into the front door.
Okay. As you approached the MacNeil's front door, do you recall whether it was open or closed?
No,
Could you hear anything?
no,
When you entered the house, could you hear anything?
no.
When you entered the house, what did you do?
We went directly back to the bathroom.
All right. When you arrived there to the bathroom, what did you see?
I briefly saw Michelle for a second, and then my view was obscured after that.
How was your view obscured?
Doug came in immediately, and I went to the back of the bathroom where the closet was, and as he went to grab her legs, my vision was obscured.
Okay.
I was behind him.
Okay, thank you. May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
I'm showing you a photograph that's been marked State's Exhibit number 16.
Okay.
You recognize what's in that photograph?
The bathtub,
When you say the bathtub, which one are you
the
referring to?
bathtub that Michelle was in.
Okay. Is that the MacNeil's bathroom?
Yes.
And this perspective in the photograph, where is it taken from?
From the door going into the bathroom.
Okay. Mrs. Aguilar, on the edge there is a laser pointer. I'm going to have you show the jury where you're talking about. So this is the same photograph we were talking about as Exhibit 16, is that correct?
Yes.
When you said that you arrived and entered with Christy, will you point to, with the laser, to where in the bathroom you went to?
Well, I came in here, and you can't see it, but I was back in the back where the closet was. So as I came in, I was back in here that the view is obscured.
Okay, so back there, do you recall what's back there?
I believe a closet.
So there's another doorway to a closet?
Mm-hmm.
You said your vision was obscured soon after you entered,
Yes,
but did you see Michelle in the bathtub?
briefly.
Will you describe how she was positioned in the tub?
I would say that her head was pretty good and slumped, maybe just a small portion of it above the rim, very small, and just I didn't see any legs or arms or anything out, just in the tub.
Will you point with your laser the side of the tub or the end of the tub where her head was?
Right here.
And then again where her feet were?
Feet are here.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
I'm going to show you it's been marked as State's Exhibit 19. Will you just briefly describe what that photograph is?
It looks like the first photograph.
The first one being number 16?
Yes.
Okay. Do you see a pen up there with you?
Yes.
Okay, will you take that pen and put a circle where you observed Michelle's head?
Okay.
And then will you please put an X where her feet were? Thank you. Your Honor, the state offers number 19.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor. If I could just see where she marked.
Yep. 19 is received.
Okay, now I'm going to ask you to come down. We've got a tub here. And the way we've agreed, just for your orientation, this red sticker here marks the location of the faucet.
Okay.
So it's almost as if you were standing on a tile outside the tub. The window's up here behind it. Okay? Would you show the jury the position of Michelle's head?
I would say the top of her head probably rested right here. The rest of her body was inside the tub.
Okay. Which way was her face pointing?
Up.
Okay. And you said already about how far above the rim of the tub you thought her head was positioned. Would you?
I would say the top of her head probably hit about right here. Because I could see her. She wasn't slumped too far down.
Okay. So you're talking about the crown of her head was right about the level of the rim?
About right here.
Okay. Will you show us where her feet were?
I can't be exactly sure. I didn't see any limbs outside the tub.
Okay,
So
so-
I assume they were just tucked in.
Okay. Do you recall how her legs were positioned?
No.
Okay, thank you. That's all. Do you remember how Michelle was dressed?
Yes.
Will you describe that?
She had a white shirt, undershirt on, and nothing else.
Okay. Do you remember the position of that shirt?
I only saw it on her, covered. It was just on her like a regular shirt.
Okay. Was it ever moved? Did you ever see it moved?
I didn't see it moved, no.
Okay. Anything else that she was wearing?
No.
You don't remember anything else?
No, she had nothing else on. I covered her, though.
Okay. We'll talk about that
Okay.
in a minute. Were you able to see Michelle's face?
Yes.
Will you describe it?
I could see stitches in her face that were bleeding just a little bit, and she had a lot of mucus underneath her nose.
Okay. Will you describe the mucus?
Kind of a greenish yellow, a lot of it.
Okay. Will you describe Michelle's skin?
She was gray.
Okay.
Her face was a little gray.
Okay. Was she wet?
Damp,
Okay. Was there water in the tub?
not that I saw.
Was there water outside the tub? At this point, while she's still in?
Well, not that I saw, no.
Okay. Do you recall seeing any blood? But you've mentioned some coming out of her incisions.
Only after the CPR began,
Okay. Was there any blood on any part of the bathroom?
not that I saw.
Will you describe where Martin was when you entered the bathroom?
He was at the head of the tub.
Okay. And let me back you up a little bit. When you entered, you talked about you went back in the corner by the closet. Why did you go back there?
To get out of the way.
Out of the way of whom?
Doug had followed, Christy's husband had followed us almost directly in. He was there almost immediately, so I moved to the back because he was going to help get her legs.
Okay. And as you're entering the bathroom, I'm getting the picture that it's kind of a fluid movement. You
It was,
enter in,
I've fluid out of the way. Doug came in, obscured my view. They pulled her out, and whatever was going on, you know, I had people in front of me, but I was still standing in the back. I couldn't leave the room.
Okay. While you're entering the bathroom, where was Martin?
At the head of the tub.
Excuse me, do you remember what he was doing?
Nothing. I don't remember. Just, I don't remember him doing anything.
Okay, do you remember whether he said anything?
Not at that point.
Okay. Did you and Christy offer to help get Michelle out of the tub?
Yes.
And did you actually help?
No.
How did Martin respond to that offer?
He wanted a man.
Okay. Will you describe the condition of the bathroom?
It was immaculate.
Were you able, when you entered, were you able to see the master bedroom?
Yes.
Will you describe it?
It was immaculate. 15 pillows on the bed, all perfectly on there. I pay attention to aesthetics, and I did notice that.
Okay. Did you notice any clothing on the floor in the bathroom?
Nothing.
You said that you kind of moved into the back of the bathroom. Doug arrived. You've described briefly what happened then. Will you kind of take us through the next steps of what you observed?
Doug came in. Martin and Doug pulled her out of the tub. She was naked from the waist down. Doug or I grabbed I believe it was like a pink towel, and put it over the top of her to cover her before the EMTs came.
Okay. Do you remember specifically whether it was you or Doug?
That grabbed the towel?
Yeah, that covered her.
I think Doug grabbed it and I covered her.
Okay. And when you say you covered her, let's talk specifically about which portion of her body.
I covered her long ways from the waist down. It was a large towel.
Okay. Then what happened?
Doug and Martin, I believe Christy started with compressions and then she left. Then Doug and Martin continued, but the EMTs were there pretty quickly.
Were you able to see Michelle during while Christy and Doug were helping Martin?
Yes.
Who did the compressions?
Christy did the compressions.
Okay. Did Doug ever
Yes,
do any?
after Christy left to wait for the ambulance.
Okay. And what was Martin doing at this point?
I think he was blowing in her nose or blowing in her mouth. He was helping with CPR.
Okay. Where was he positioned?
At the head.
All right. And where were Christy and Doug while they were doing compressions? Well, let's ask for Christy. Where was she?
When she was helping with the compression, she was up by the chest, and then she left. Doug took her place, and I still was standing in the back of the bathroom.
So as you're standing in the back of the bathroom and looking on this scene, were you closer to Michelle's feet or closer to her head?
Her feet.
And do you recall, in relation to Michelle's body, which side people were on while CPR was occurring?
I believe that Martin they were both to the right of Michelle. Martin more up top and Christy doing the compressions. My right. If I were looking at Michelle, it would be my right.
Okay, and your right, would that be closer to the door? Or
Closer to the tub.
Okay. Did you ever see any water come out of Michelle?
No.
Did you ever see any of that mucus that was on her face get onto Martin?
No.
Did you ever notice whether it was wiped away?
No.
Objection, Your Honor, this is all leading.
Sustained.
Were Martin's CPR efforts continuous?
I believe so.
Okay, did he ever interrupt them?
The EMTs were there pretty fast, so there wasn't a long period of time which they were doing compressions.
Did he ever say anything during the CPR process before the EMTs got there?
Not during the process.
Did you ever, when you were in the bathroom with Martin, did he say anything?
One statement was, that I heard was that he told her not to do this. I told her not to do this.
Did he ever say what this was?
No.
Okay. Do you recall, when it comes to emergency responders, whether it was police or paramedics who responded first?
I believe it was the paramedics.
Okay. Do you recall testifying earlier at the preliminary hearing in
Yes.
this case? Do you recall speaking with investigators about this case?
Yes.
Is it true that in a prior statement you said, why did you have that surgery? That's what Martin was saying?
That was what I believe to be the effect of what he was saying. I told her not to do this. Kind of why was what I took from it. I cannot remember the exact words that came out of his mouth.
Okay. Do you remember telling investigators before that that Martin was pacing?
Inside or outside? I believe I saw he was outside the house later, and he was pacing up on the front step.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. What happened when emergency responders arrived?
They immediately started working on Michelle, and I was able to leave the room.
Okay. Why were you able to leave? Well, let me say, were you unable to leave before?
I felt unable because I would have had to have stepped over the body in order to have gotten out of the bathroom.
Okay. What changed when the emergency responders arrived and you were now able to leave?
They asked me to leave.
Okay. Okay. What did you do after you left the bathroom?
I went out to the front walk.
Okay. By front walk, what do you mean?
I actually went out and stood on their driveway and was regrouping with the children, and I drove carpool that day, so I was trying to get things together and get ready to get out of there.
Okay, and by their driveway, do you mean the MacNeills and the Daniels driveway?
Actually, their driveway looks like one driveway almost, so just in the middle of that big area of concrete. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did you see Michelle being taken to the hospital?
I did.
And let me be more specific. Did you see her being removed from the MacNeill house?
Yes.
Will you describe what she looked like when you saw her then?
I didn't look at her face. I just saw the body on the gurney as they lifted it into the ambulance.
Okay. Did you ever learn whether Michelle survived or not?
I drove back to the hospital after I dropped the kids off and had inquired about it.
Okay, when you talk about dropping the kids off, is this...
I drove to Orem. I drove carpool for preschool that day. I picked up several other children in the neighborhood, drove up to Orem, then drove back to American Fork Hospital.
Okay, did you interact with anybody at the hospital?
I tried to. They wouldn't give me any information.
Okay. Did you ever see or interact with Martin after Michelle died?
I did.
When was that?
I interacted with him before the funeral. I babysat the girls. And so whatever interaction needed to be done between him and Alexis in arranging of my babysitting the younger girls.
When you say before the funeral, are you talking about the day of the funeral? But before the actual funeral occurred?
No, after the day of the funeral, I took the younger girls.
Okay. Did you attend the funeral?
I did.
And when you say you took the younger girls, who are you referring to?
I'm referring to Ada, Giselle, Elle, and Sabrina.
And Ada, we already know, is the MacNeill's youngest daughter. You've said that.
Yes.
Who are the others?
The others are their adopted daughters from Romania.
Okay. Did you interact with Martin that day that you took the girls and
Yes.
for the funeral? Will you describe that interaction?
He walked down with his sister and her husband
Down to where?
to my house to retrieve the girls.
Okay. Did you have a conversation with him?
A brief conversation, yes.
Will you describe his demeanor?
He was very calm. He was drinking a Dr. Pepper, walking.
Okay. Any problems with his walking?
Not that I noticed that day.
Was he using a cane?
He may have been.
Okay. Did you see him using a cane anytime during that day of the funeral?
I don't remember it.
Well, let me ask you, did you see him using a cane at all?
Yes,
When was that?
for quite a bit of time before Michelle's death.
Did he continue using the cane after her death?
For a period, and then not.
Okay. Will you, do you remember the conversation you had with him when you visited after the funeral?
It was just pleasantries. He seemed okay. He discussed, I have a truss system on the front of my house, and he made mention that he and Michelle had wanted to add something similar to their home. Just chit-chat.
Okay. Did he talk about Michelle at all during that conversation?
No.
After April 11th, did you ever discuss Michelle's death with Martin?
Yes.
When was that?
I returned the girls home. I had been watching them, and he let me know that, go ahead.
You'd been, what
I
year
had been
was that
watching,
about?
oh, I'm sorry. I don't know which day it was. It was just shortly after the funeral.
Okay.
And I returned the girls, and in the doorway, he mentioned to me that it had been an arrhythmia, and he seemed,
Objection, relevance, Your Honor.
okay,
In terms of how he seemed and her, that's speculation.
Overruled, she may testify as to what she observed. Go ahead.
he seemed relieved that they had been able to find out what was wrong with Michelle.
I'm going to object and move to strike that. She's testifying about what she felt Martin was feeling.
You sustained, you may lay further foundation for her conclusions.
What is it about how he was behaving that led you to that conclusion?
He was very calm and smiled and had said they had found a heart arrhythmia, and that they knew. He said, it's good to know. It's good to know.
Okay, thank you. Did he ever talk about whether anyone was responsible for Michelle's death?
No.
Did he ever tell you whether anyone had accused him of being responsible for Michelle's death?
No.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may. The witness?
The witness, please.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm showing you a photograph that's been marked, State's Exhibit number 18. Do you recognize the woman in that photograph?
I do.
Who is she?
Jillian.
How did you come to know her?
She was introduced to me.
By whom?
Martin.
When?
They were delivering a small gift to people who had helped with the funeral.
How close in time to the funeral was this?
Very shortly after the funeral. Maybe a week, maybe a little bit longer.
Okay. Something we haven't talked about. Do you recall what day the funeral happened?
No.
Okay. Do you recall whether it was soon or a long time after Michelle's death?
The funeral
Yes.
seemed about the regular length of time, maybe 3 or 4 days.
Okay. And then you were introduced to Jillian some week or so after that.
A week or two, perhaps.
How do you know her name is Jillian?
She was introduced to me as Jillian.
Okay. Did she tell you that, or did Martin?
No, Martin told me that.
Will you describe the context of meeting her?
I was working out in my yard. It was pretty filthy dirty. I wasn't up for company, and they pulled up. Martin rolled down the window. I looked in. He introduced Jillian. This is Jillian. I think said something to the effect of, I'm trying to think of how he said that. This is Jillian. I think I've mentioned her. She's going to come in and help me with the girls.
Did he tell you in what sense he had mentioned her before?
No, and I only assumed because we'd only spoken of the other girl that once in February.
Okay, so it was,
The way the context of the conversation went, it led me to believe that this is Jillian, I've mentioned her, she's going to come in and help me with the kids.
okay. Did he mention whether, well, let me ask, do you recall telling investigators that Martin had told you that this is the same woman that he asked about the previous February, about staying in the neighbor's home?
Could you restate that?
Sure. You recall discussing this matter with investigators, is that
Yes.
true? Do you recall in that discussion with investigators telling them that Martin told you that this Jillian was the same nurse that he was looking for a home for before Michelle's death?
I do remember that, yes.
Okay. And is that accurate?
Well, yes, it's accurate. I can't tell you exactly if I assumed it was the girl, but I know that the dialogue that Martin and I had led me to believe that that was the girl that he had spoken of in February.
Okay. You just don't recall the exact words?
I don't recall the exact words, no.
What did Martin say about why she was with him and her living arrangements at that time?
She was going to be a nanny for the girls.
Okay. Do you recall the phrase, "it's all worked out"?
Yes. Well, Martin had to go back to work. His older children no longer lived at home. He had the younger children. He needed somebody I was very concerned about who was going to watch the girls, especially since in my head, Martin was going to be dying soon as well.
Okay.
So it was relieving to me to know that he had found someone who he had described to me as quiet nurse coming in to help him with the girls.
Okay. Do you recall whether it was you that said it had all worked out or whether it was him?
I do not recall.
Okay. Could I have 1 minute, Your Honor?
You may.
At the preliminary hearing, you said that when you came into the bathroom, you heard Martin saying, "Oh my God, oh my God." Is that accurate to your memory?
I do remember him saying, oh my God, but I do not remember whether it was in the bathroom or on the front porch.
Let's talk about, I don't think we ever went back to what he was doing on the front porch. Will you describe that?
He was on the front porch. He may have taken a phone call, I'm not sure, but a gentleman showed up wearing scrubs and a lab coat, and he was having conversation with the gentleman.
Okay, and did you overhear that
I
conversation?
did not overhear it. I only was able to see some hand gestures, some pacing.
You describe the hand gestures?
More or less just, this kind of thing, putting his hands on his head, on his face, moving them around.
When it comes to the mucus that you saw on Michelle's face. Do you recall whether that was dealt with?
I don't recall. I've thought about it a lot of times, but I don't recall.
Did you see that mucus on anybody else?
No.
I'm sorry, just a couple more questions. Let's back up to the Sunday school class in which Martin described his cancer ailment. At that time, did he say anything about how long he might have to live?
Less than a year.
When you're in the bathroom and Martin and the Daniels were performing CPR, could you see Martin's actions?
Yes.
Did you see him breathing into her mouth?
No.
What did you see him doing?
I'm going to object, Your Honor. This has been asked and answered.
Overruled.
Standing at her head, I don't remember him actually blowing into her mouth. I don't.
Was he in the posture of performing
Yes,
CPR?
yes.
So he was standing at some point, but did he actually get down over her? And
I believe
like he was
so,
doing
yes.
CPR? Okay. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Thank you. You may cross-examine.
Hi, Ms. Aguilar.
Hi.
Can I call you Angie?
You can?
Okay. Didn't you just state a few minutes ago that you saw Martin breathing puffs of air into Michelle? Wasn't that what you said?
I know that he was up top and that was his role. I don't remember seeing it. It's possible that I blocked it out too. I don't remember actually physically seeing that. I wondered about that after the fact because of the mucus under the nose. I did not see it wiped away, and I did not see him actually put his mouth on her mouth.
And so what you're saying is that you don't remember?
I don't remember.
Okay, and the reason we're talking about this mucus is because the prosecutors followed up with that question with you at some point. Isn't that correct? After your testimony at the preliminary hearing?
They followed up after the preliminary hearing?
Asking you about?
No.
Okay, all right. Now, you stated that Michelle was wearing a white T-shirt?
Yes.
Okay, and that T-shirt was wet, correct?
Yes.
And you're positive that she was wearing a T-shirt?
I am.
Okay, and you're positive because in your mind, what you said at the preliminary hearing is that you thought it was strange she was wearing a T-shirt because she had just had facial plastic surgery, and why was she putting a T-shirt over her head?
Yes.
Okay. And she was not wearing garments.
No.
The T-shirt was transparent.
Yes.
She was not wearing a long, dark shirt.
No.
She was not wearing a bra.
No.
Okay, at the preliminary hearing in this case, you testified that there was some blood on Michelle's face.
Yes.
Do you, when did you see that blood on her face?
After CPR was performed.
And it was quite a lot of blood, is that correct, what you said?
No, not you would have to determine what a lot of blood is. The incisions were bleeding.
And there was blood all over her face?
No.
There was not?
No.
Her face was bloody?
The incisions were bleeding. Nothing that I saw that were large drips of blood coming from her face, just that the incisions were wet.
May I approach Your Honor?
May.
I'm directing you to your preliminary hearing transcript testimony there.
What volume and page number are you in?
Let's see. Let's see. Sorry.
I've got volume 1. She begins at 274. What page is this?
You know what, I'm sorry, this is the interview.
Okay.
You gave an interview with Doug Whitney,
Okay,
and that's the investigator for the Utah County Attorney's Office.
all right.
And did you give that interview in December of 2009?
Sounds right, yes.
And in that interview, you talked to Mr. Whitney about bleeding on Michelle's face?
Yes.
During CPR?
Yes,
Okay, and didn't you tell him that Michelle's face was bloody?
her whole face started bleeding, so she had incisions along her facial here, and those incisions, in my opinion, when the CPR began, they started to open and started to bleed a little. I did not see blood through her nose, her mouth, her eyes, just she was laying on her back. So these incisions started to bleed and perhaps go backward, but I didn't see a tremendous amount, the blood coming this way onto her face.
I see, but you did see blood?
Yes.
Okay, that's all I was trying to say. The prosecutor asked you about this statement when Martin was saying, oh my God, and pacing. And you believe that that happened when you were outside waiting for the ambulance?
I think so.
Do you recall at a prior hearing that you testified that that occurrence happened when you were out standing by the ambulance and not when you were in the bathroom?
You're saying that I said that it happened in the bathroom?
No, I'm just saying that it happened out front while you were waiting for the ambulance.
I believe so. I believe so.
You don't recall that happening?
Inside the
bathroom.
bathroom? I don't. It was pretty fast. I recall him saying she shouldn't have done this, that kind of thing in the bathroom. Worry. There might have been an oh my God in the bathroom. I can't be sure. There were just those, I think there were 3 oh my Gods and a she shouldn't have done this, and it was between that small period of time.
Okay, but he wasn't pacing in the bathroom. The pacing was outside by the ambulance.
Yes, there was not enough room to pace, I don't think, in the bathroom.
Okay.
Thank you. Do you have any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Will she remain under her trial subpoena?
Yes, please.
Do you have questions? If you'll pass them to the end of the row. If you'll approach, counsel. any other clothing in the bathroom?
No.
Do you have follow-up
No, Your Honor.
from the defense? You'll remain under your trial subpoena, which means you may be notified to come back and give further testimony for the whole length of time that's indicated in your subpoena, but you'll be called to do that. May she step down?
From the state's perspective, yes.
Very good. Thank you. You may call your next witness.
Your Honor, the state calls Doug Daniels.
Mr. Daniels, if you'll come up here to the clerk's desk, please raise your right hand and be sworn.
You do solemnly swear the testimony you shall give in the case now pending before the court will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Thank you. If you'll be seated here and respond to counsel's questions. You may.
Good morning, Mr. Daniels. Thank you.
Morning.
Thanks for being here. Will you state your name and spell it for the record, please?
Doug Daniels, D-A-N-I-E-L-S.
Thank you. Do you know the MacNeill family?
I do.
How did you meet them?
Specifically the first meeting, or just they moved into?
How do you know them?
Yeah, they moved in right next door to us in the neighborhood.
Okay, what neighborhood was that?
Creekside and Pleasant Grove.
Okay. When you say they moved in right next door to us, will you describe their house in relation to yours?
Our house is facing west, and they moved in right next door just north of us. So both of our homes face to the west, and they're just to the north of us.
Okay. Before Michelle died, did you have conversations with Martin about his health?
Yes.
Okay. What were those, what did he say about his health?
There were several different conversations. At one point, he started limping and showed up with a boot on or something on his foot, and something was going on with his foot. So in regular neighborly conversation, I'd ask him, what's going on? Are you all right? And he just said that he had some procedures done, was having some complications, and sometimes he didn't act like it was a very big deal, but other times he acted like it was something that was more serious than that, and kind of a wait and see thing.
Okay. When you say sometimes he acted like it was more serious than that, did he ever say anything specific?
At one point, we had a conversation about him maybe having to leave town or go for 2 or 3 weeks to somewhere for some kind of treatment or some kind of clinic or something. And the impression that I got is that it was some kind of something fairly serious, a cancer situation that was unable to be taken care of or had to be removed or something like that. And I don't remember him ever specifically saying, I have cancer, but I had that impression that it was some form of it or type of it.
Based on conversations you had
Correct.
with him? Are you still living in that Mill Creek neighborhood?
No.
Have you kept in touch with any of the MacNeills?
No.
Do you recall April 11th, 2007?
I do.
What were you doing that morning?
That morning, I was at a neighbor's house just probably 4 houses away around the end of the circle, helping him with a project.
Okay, when you say around the end of the circle, is that, will you describe directionally from your house where that is?
Yeah, it's a large neighborhood in a large circle. I think it's 33 homes that are around a large park in the center. So our house was on the top side of the circle, just before you round the bottom, so just around the corner, very close.
Okay, is it in the direction of the MacNeill's house or the opposite direction?
Opposite direction,
You said you were helping with the basement there.
correct.
Had you been there all morning?
Yes, I had.
Were there times that you left that neighbor's house
To come home, or there
for
could
any
have,
reason?
there could have been. It was I was back and forth over the course of a few weeks. So that specific morning, I could have been back and forth a couple of times, or maybe not at all. I'd definitely gone over and then come back when the events started to unfold, but I don't recall specifically how much back and forth I'd had that morning.
Okay. Do you recall whether there was any?
I don't recall specifically.
Okay, that's fine. Will you describe what happened between 11 and noon that morning?
I received a phone call from my wife, from Christy. The phone rang, and I could tell she was out of breath and hurried, speaking quickly. I could tell something was wrong, and I don't know if I caught the word help or we need help or something, and so I just immediately cut her off. I said, "Where are you?" And she said, "MacNeill's," and I hung up the phone and directly took off running.
Okay. About how long would you estimate it took you to arrive there?
15, 20 seconds maybe. It's probably only 40, 50 yards away.
Were you able to see Christy?
As soon as I came out of the neighbor's house, I could see them running up the sidewalk towards the MacNeill's, and so they entered before me, but by the time I got to the doorway, they couldn't have been very far in front of me.
Okay, and they being who?
Christy and Angie.
Okay. You entered the MacNeill's home, and by that time you were almost caught up with Christy and Angie. Is that what you're saying?
I believe it couldn't have been very long, because I remember seeing them entering the house as I was coming up to the house.
Okay, and as you entered the house, what did you do?
As I entered the house, I don't know if Christy said back here or something, or by then they were just very shortly in front of me, but I turned to my left to go down their hallway, then a quick right into their master bedroom, and then a quick left is where they were standing.
Okay. May I approach, Owner?
You may.
I'm showing you an exhibit that's been marked as State's Exhibit number 16. It's actually a photograph. Will you describe what that is? Well, let me ask first, do you recognize the
I
contents?
do. It's the MacNeill's master bathroom.
Okay. And is that roughly what you saw when you arrived? I mean, minus the people?
Yes.
Okay. And to clarify that, do you observe water on the bathroom floor?
I don't recall. I mean,
Let me ask you, in the photo,
in the photo, do I observe water? Yes.
do you recall whether that water was there when you arrived?
What was that? Pardon?
Do you recall whether the water was on the floor when you arrived?
I don't recall. There were, that Martin was standing there and there were people standing there, and that's not what my attention was focused to, so I don't recall.
Okay. You said Martin was there, and who else was in there?
Martin was there, and Christy was there, and Angie was there.
Anybody else?
No.
I mean, was Michelle there?
And Michelle, yes.
Okay, where was Michelle?
Michelle was in the bathtub.
How would you describe the scene as you entered the bathroom?
The scene, I could tell that there was definitely something wrong that needed attended to. Martin was standing at the head of the tub over to the left side, and if I recall, he was not necessarily on one knee, but maybe bent over with kind of his arms inside the tub.
Okay, I'm going to have you hold on for
Okay.
just a second. Can we lower the lights and put the picture of the tub up? Mr. Daniels, in front of you there's a laser pointer.
Yeah.
Will you just describe where you saw Martin in the position you're describing now?
Martin was here,
Okay.
standing in this area right here, or kneeling, kind of, I don't know if he was on one knee or kind of standing, leaning over Michelle's head, which is in the tub here.
Okay, Michelle's head, I'm sorry, can you indicate again where her head was?
Under the faucet side over here.
Okay, and where were her feet?
Her feet and legs were down here.
Okay.
You may.
I'm handing you State's Exhibit number 20, which is a photograph. What's that a photograph of?
The MacNeill's bathroom.
Let me get the lights back.
Actually, I'm gonna wait for that. Can we just keep them off for just a minute?
Okay.
Is it any different from number 16?
It looks identical.
Okay, we're going to make it different now. Will you mark with a circle where Michelle's head was on number 20?
Okay?
And then will you mark where an X where her feet were?
Yes.
And just for the jury's benefit, will you take that laser pointer and point out where you made the X for her feet?
The X is down here in this location.
Were her feet inside or outside the tub?
Her feet were not outside, they were collapsed down inside. Her knees were kind of up and her feet were tucked down in the tub.
Okay, and do you recall where Christy and Angie were at this point?
At this point, they were to my right and to the right of the picture there that you see. So I was able to basically walk straight in and go straight to her feet, and they were on my right.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. The state would move to admit number 20, Your Honor.
Would you like to see it?
Yes, please.
Any objection to 20?
No objection.
20 is received.
You said Martin was at the left of the tub toward Michelle's head. Will you describe what he was wearing?
He had on a white lab coat and maybe just some dark slacks.
Okay. Do you recall whether he or his clothing were wet?
I do not recall seeing any of his clothing wet.
Were you able to observe what he was doing?
He seemed to be just kind of near her head, kind of over her, but other than that, when I first walked in, no.
Okay. Could you see her face when you first walked in?
As soon as I walked straight to her feet, then, her face became into view as I passed him.
Okay. Will you describe Martin's demeanor when you entered the bathroom?
When I first entered, I don't recall anything really being said. I remember, I don't know if it's because somebody said, let's get her out, or maybe I even said, let's get her out of the tub, but the perception was that I would go straight to her feet and we would lift her out of the tub.
All right. I'm going to have you, if you don't mind, step off the witness stand for a
Sure.
minute. Come down to this bathtub we have. What we've done is put a red sticker here where the faucet was. So if you're standing in the MacNeill's bathroom, it's pretty much the same orientation. In what, will you show the jury what position Michelle's body was in?
Her head was on this side, fairly low. Her body was kind of slumped down in. Her head was probably very even to the top of the tub. Body slumped down in. Her knees kind of up, and then her feet tucked down behind her knees.
Okay. When you say her head was kind of even with the tub, are you talking, what part of her head are you
The top
talking
of her
about?
head, the top of her head may have been partially above, but fairly low. So the top of her head was probably pretty level to the top of the tub.
Okay. And when you entered the bathroom, were you able to see into the tub?
I was.
Do you recall water?
There was no water.
Okay. Do you recall whether Michelle was wet or not?
She was damp, not soaking wet, but a little bit damp.
Okay. Will you show, kind of maybe pantomime your actions that you took when you lifted Michelle out of the tub?
I came straight to her feet, accessing it from here, got my hands under her knees and picked her straight up and out and set her down with Martin, just beside the tub.
Okay. Can the record reflect that he's going to the end opposite the sticker where the faucet is, the sticker marking the location of the faucet, bending over, picking up under, making a motion with his arms as picking up under the legs, and then placing her just outside the tub on the floor?
Accept that.
Yes.
The record will so reflect.
Thank you. And did you set her immediately outside the tub, or where did you position her body?
Immediately beside the tub,
Okay.
Probably, just probably a foot and a half between her body and the tub is where we sat.
Okay, and when, did you rotate her body at all, or was it just out of the tub onto the floor?
Directly out of the tub.
Okay, thanks.
Have a seat. Thank you.
Did it look to you like she had fallen into the tub?
No, no, she just looked lifeless and collapsed, kind of slumped down in the bottom of the tub, so not necessarily fallen, no.
Okay. Do you recall her, whether she was dressed or not?
I recall she didn't have anything on except for a light-colored white tank top, kind of a spaghetti strap tank top.
Okay.
And nothing else was on.
Did it look like, when you say a tank top, is that a T-shirt, or how would you describe that tank top?
Not necessarily a T-shirt, but a T-shirt that has the spaghetti straps that connect to a more of a tube top kind of thing, but more of a full shirt with the spaghetti strap, connections on it.
When she said she didn't have anything else on, was the lower part of her body covered?
No, nothing else on.
Okay. Will you describe, I'm sorry, when it comes to her position in the tub, was she facing up or facing down?
Her face was facing up and forward. I mean, she's kind of slumped down, so she was not face down. She was up and forward, yes.
Okay. So were you able to, at any point, to see her face?
Yes.
Will you describe what it looked like?
She was definitely lifeless. It looked a little bit discolored, a little bit puffy. Like I say, she was damp, not soaking wet. It looked like her hair was, I believe, kind of pulled back, and the ends that were hanging out looked more dampish, but yet the top was more fray and a little bit more dry. Not like she had just been submerged, but was definitely damp and wettish.
Okay. Did you see any marks or wounds on her face or anything?
Not when I initially saw her and pulled her out of the tub, but when I started doing compressions on her, then I did, yes.
Okay. Could you describe the bathroom, the condition of the bathroom when you entered?
It was not cluttered. It was, I mean, it definitely, my focus wasn't looking around seeing what the bathroom was like, but I don't remember anything being in the way or cluttered, or so no, it seemed very organized.
Do you remember water being anywhere?
I don't remember a lot of water, no.
Did you see any blood?
There was some blood present.
Where?
I don't recall necessarily seeing any blood until we started to do CPR on her and I was closer to her face, and then I could see that there was some incisions in certain locations on her, and it looked like a little bit of, not flowing blood, but a little bit of redness that was mixing with the water that was kind of on her, that was coming from those locations.
And when you talked about the incisions, you were making a motion with your finger behind your ear. Was that inadvertent, or is that where the incisions were?
No, that's where I recall the incisions being, or near the ear area. I don't remember if it was right behind on the jawline or right in front, but somewhere on the side of her face, and I believe a little bit above her brows.
Okay. Did you see any blood anywhere else besides on Michelle
At any point?
during this time when you were in the bathroom?
No, just on Michelle.
Was there any other clothing anywhere else in the bathroom?
I don't recall seeing any other clothing, anything else.
Did you ever see bottoms or pants?
No.
Did you do a thorough review of the bathroom at this point?
Later or at this point?
At this point.
No.
Okay.
As we were doing CPR a little bit during that period, I remember looking around for some stuff, but not, I don't know if you want to go there yet or where you're at.
We'll talk about that in a minute.
Okay.
When you took her out of the tub, what did you do next?
When I took her out of the tub, we brought her out with enough distance that there was walking space between the tub and Michelle, and I believe Christy kind of came up to my right between the tub and Michelle and said, "I know CPR, what should I do?" and kind of immediately went to the area to do chest compressions.
What did Martin do?
Martin at this time was still at her head, and he knelt down at her head. So Christy was on the right side of her body, if you're standing above her looking at her feet, and he was on the left side, kneeling kind of more above her and to her left side, and it appeared that he started doing, you know, the CPR procedure.
Okay, over her head?
Over her head, yeah.
Okay. What were you doing?
I was standing at her feet because Christy went straight to do her chest compressions. So we just observed for I think Christy did one round of chest compressions, and at this point I told Christy to go out and make sure the ambulance can find us. I'll take over that. I can do that.
Did you see what Angie was doing?
Angie was behind me, not at that specific moment. I just know that she was behind me.
Okay, she's just in the bathroom?
Yeah.
But since she's behind you, you weren't able to observe
Correct.
what she was doing? Okay. Did you observe any fluids coming from Michelle? You've talked about blood coming from her incisions. Did you observe any others?
Yeah, there was quite a bit of mucus around her nose and mouth area, and that it kind of was running down and kind of mixing with maybe those blood areas and
this
kind
is,
of designated.
at what point did you observe this?
This was, I don't know as I necessarily observed that until I started doing the chest compressions and got closer to her face.
Okay. Do you know what, was that mucus ever dealt with?
This is the point at which I kind of looked around, because I remember thinking if I was the one giving mouth to mouth, and it would be hard to do without removing it. And so I remember looking around and trying to find something to wipe it off with, and there was really nothing around. I couldn't find anything. Prior to that is when I started doing the chest compressions. I did one round, and then I turned and asked Angie to see if she could find something to throw over her body. I just, we had a second, and I said, can you find something to try and cover her up with? And she found something and put it on her. But I remember looking around trying to find something to hand to Martin, or maybe he was kind of over her face and doing a lot, and it looked like at one point he either tried to wipe it with his hand, or I don't know if he used a sleeve or something, but I remember recalling that he kind of tried to deal with it a little bit at one point, and I couldn't find anything to help him out with it.
Were you able to observe Martin's part of the CPR process after you took over?
Yes, part of it.
Compressions.
Mhm.
Okay. Did you see, well, let me ask you, where was your attention focused?
I mean, it's tough to say. I was focused more on what I was doing, the chest compressions. So I think I was more focused on that, and just, you try to take it all in, but...
Okay. Could you see Martin at that point?
Yes.
Where was he, well, let me ask you, when you took over the chest compressions, where in relation to Michelle's body were you working on her?
I was between the tub and her body.
Same position Christy had been in?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And Martin was more on the opposite side of us, over her head.
Okay. So were you able to see him doing the mouth-to-mouth?
I was able to see yeah, I was.
Was he doing mouth-to-mouth?
He would go towards her mouth. It appeared he was giving her mouth-to-mouth, and then he would stop and listen and then instruct us on when to continue our chest compressions. So it appeared that he had his face over her face, yes.
Did you ever see the mucus that was on Michelle's face on anybody else?
I don't recall seeing it on anybody else, no.
And specifically on Martin?
I don't remember seeing it on him. I do remember thinking if I was giving her mouth-to-mouth, I would have a hard time doing it without dealing with that, and that's all I really remember. I don't remember seeing it clung to him when he rose from her or anything. No, I don't remember seeing that.
While you were working on her chest compressions, did you stop while Martin was doing mouth-to-mouth?
I did.
Did you ever see or feel Michelle's chest rise during those breaths?
No, I did not.
When you were doing the compressions, was it, were you skin to skin, or was there clothing between you?
We were skin to skin. I believe when we picked her up out of the tub and kind of set her down, her top had got pulled up so that her breasts were exposed, and it was skin to skin.
Okay. And you're making a hand motion up to the upper part
Yeah,
of
her
your chest?
the bottom of her top was up here, yes.
Okay. So you're, Do you recall about how many sets of compressions you did?
It was several. I would say 12 to 15, maybe even more.
While you and Martin were working on Michelle doing the CPR, did Martin say anything?
He did. He was instructive through the whole process. Like, I don't believe that I ever started or stopped on my own accord. He would always tell me when to do it.
Okay. Did he say anything else besides instructions about CPR?
Yes, there was. Yeah, he would make different comments. I would be doing chest compressions. He would say stop, and then he would act like he got his ear down and was listening. Then he would put his face over hers. Then he would tell me, okay, continue, and so I would continue, and then he'd throw his hands in the air. I think twice he would say, why would you do this? All because of a stupid surgery. And then he would say, okay, continue. And so I would continue doing chest compressions.
Okay. How would you describe his demeanor during the CPR process?
I remember thinking that his demeanor was, at times he was very analytical and very in control and very calm, and other times he was, a little bit frustrated and when he would holler out. And at a couple of times he would tell me to stop, and he would thump on her chest. I believe he did it 2 or maybe 3 times, where he would beat on her chest with the bottom part of his hand, and I assumed it was to try and start her heart or something. And so he would have a bit of an outburst and then tell me, very calmly, okay, continue.
When you said he was hitting her on the chest with his hand, is that with the closed fist?
Yes, closed fist, the
motion
bottom
you
part of
made.
his hand. Correct. Yes.
Okay. You thought was he hitting her hard?
Not real hard. I remember thinking, you wouldn't want to whack somebody like that. You would feel it, but I assumed, being a physician, that he would know what he was doing at the proper level to do that. I remember thinking it's pretty hard, but not that you're really going to hurt anybody with.
Okay. What ended your, well, let me ask, I've asked you to describe Michelle's face, and you've said that you had one glance out of it as you're getting out of the tub. Were you able to take a better look as you were doing CPR?
Yes, I was. I noticed the incisions a little bit more, and when with Martin's comment about all because of a stupid surgery, why I was able to link that she had probably had that done, and her face was a little bit puffy. So yeah, I had time to observe. We were there for, it seemed like, a long time. I remember observing Angie, that she was standing in the closet doorway, kind of just holding her hands over her mouth, and was pretty frozen and pretty, yeah, she was pretty traumatized over what she was seeing. So I had time to observe things. Yes.
Okay. Where would you've talked about incisions around her ears? Did you see any incisions anywhere else?
I just remember seeing a few locations, maybe on her hairline and around her ears, and then her face, and maybe her eyes were kind of puffy, but not anything else.
Okay. When did you stop performing CPR on Michelle?
The EMTs showed up, and I remember looking up and seeing them come through the doorway, and they said, keep doing what you're doing, guys, as they were unwrapping their equipment. I think a puffer I remember seeing that they were installing and putting together. And
Puffer, for what did you understand the purpose of that?
for giving air, for taking the place of a human insertion of air. So, and then I continued to give compressions until one of them came over and said, okay, we got it from here, and they took over, and I exited the room.
Did Martin leave with you?
Yes, he did.
Immediately?
I think he went out right behind me when I went out, yes.
After you left the bathroom and the bedroom area, what did you do?
I went straight out front. By this time, there was quite a few neighbors and whatnot going on, asking what's going on. And I remember thinking, I want to find a sink and kind of wash my hands. They were a little bit damp from what we were doing, and so I walked straight into the house, washed my hands, and came straight back out to the neighborhood, out to the front.
Speaking about that, I want to back up a little bit. When you were doing the chest compressions, do you remember what Michelle's skin felt like?
I remember she didn't feel rigid at all, and it didn't seem, she wasn't cold to me. She wasn't real hot. It seemed like we just, pulled a body out of a tub and I don't remember being cold or hot. It was just felt room temperature.
Okay. And when you say you don't remember her feeling rigid, what are you referring to there?
Well, just, how long she'd been in the tub, things go through your mind as you're dealing with the situation that you're in the middle of, and I don't remember her being stiff or rigid or when you're doing chest compressions on her, her body seemed to react as though it wasn't rigid. It was more lifeless and limp.
So when you pulled her out, did her legs straighten out and were her limbs?
Yeah, they must have gone straight naturally and easily because I don't remember them staying in any position or, yes, her legs were straight though when we pulled her out.
When you exited the home, do you recall whether there were emergency vehicles there?
Yes, there was.
Do you know what type or how many?
I recall seeing one ambulance for sure when I exited, and that was parked directly in front of the MacNeill home, just in front of the driveway. So there may have been some other, I don't remember another ambulance, just one. There may have been, eventually there was a couple of police cars, but as soon as I exited, I don't recall anything other than the ambulance.
Okay. Did you see Michelle being taken out of the home?
I did.
Were you able to see her, were you able to see her face, or was it just that you saw the process of her being removed?
I saw the process. I don't specifically remember seeing her face, but I saw the process. I mean, you could tell that was her that was on the gurney, for sure.
And how far away were you?
I was probably 20 feet. I was standing up in the middle of our driveways. We didn't share driveways. Our driveways just connected so that they were kind of one solid. I mean, we both had 3-car garages, but the driveways connected in the middle. So I was standing up where the two driveways connect, and so I was probably 25, 30 feet away.
Okay. What happened after Michelle was taken away?
After she was taken away, there was quite a bit of milling around. The neighbors and stuff. There were a couple of police officers there, at least at that point, and
Was Martin still there?
no, I believe Martin got in the ambulance. I'm not 100% sure, but I think he left with the ambulance.
What did you do after, there's this milling about period? What did you do to kind of end this event?
Yeah, as everybody kind of left and stuff, I went up to the front door and there was a peace officer there, and I just had a short, quick discussion with him about. He asked me if who I was, where I lived, and then he.
Before we go on, do you recall his name?
I don't.
Okay, go ahead.
Then he asked me of course, if I knew the MacNeills. I did. He says, "Well, can you close the place up and take care of it?" I said, "Yeah, sure, I can." And then he left.
And what did you do?
At this point, I went back in the house, just kind of close it up, and so that the front door was open, and just kind of do a walkthrough to see if I had left anything in there or something. And when I went in the bathroom, I observed, the water on the floor and a little bit of mucus mixed with blood that was on the bathroom floor. And when I walked in, I observed that there was some on the carpet that was just outside of the bathroom door in the master bedroom. So I looked around to try to find something to kind of wipe it up with. I remember thinking the kids are going to be come home from school. I don't know if anybody's going to be here before then. I don't know if Michelle's going to be okay. I don't know if anything. So I remember thinking that I was going to wipe a little bit of this up, and looked around for something in the bathroom or the bedroom to wipe it up, and I couldn't find anything. So I went back out to the past the front door where their laundry room is located, and found some towels there.
Let me clarify. When you say past the front, are you saying the front door is where their laundry room is located?
No, the front door. I would have to pass in front of the front door to get to their laundry room. So I walked beyond their front door. The laundry room was not closed or anything. The door was open, and looked around it. and there was a small pile of towels there in the laundry room that I grabbed one of those.
Okay. Were the towels wet, dry?
The towels were kind of dampish, like they had been used recently. They weren't rolled in a tight ball, but just kind of wadded up in a pile, and there was maybe 3 or 4 of them.
Okay. And you went down to the laundry because, were there no towels in the bathroom?
I couldn't find any in the bathroom. I don't remember opening any cupboards or anything, but I remember looking around, and there just wasn't anything there to wipe up that kind of thing with. You know, there may have been something hanging in the closet, but I wasn't going to grab that to wipe it up with, so.
Okay. Did Martin ever speak to you about Michelle's death after April 11th?
Yeah, we had conversations, yes.
Did he ever explain to you what happened or what caused her death?
Yeah, I remember Christy and I being in the driveway and having a discussion with him.
Sustained, if you could indicate time and place.
Sure. First let me ask you, if he ever did,
Yes.
when did he do that?
This would have been just a couple of days after Michelle's death.
Okay. And where were you guys?
We were standing out in the front area of the house.
Okay, on those driveways or?
Yeah, probably, yep.
Okay. What did he explain to you at that point?
He told us that they had found that it was a heart problem, some kind of a heart problem, and there's nothing anybody really could have done about it.
Do you remember him discussing water as part of the death?
No,
Did you meet with investigators in this case?
I did.
And did you discuss with them the events that we've been discussing today?
Yes.
Did you discuss these conversations with Martin after Michelle's death with the investigators?
I'm sure we did.
Do you recall telling them that Martin said to you, there was no water in her lungs, it's obviously not a drowning?
It certainly could have been possible, yes.
Okay, but you don't recall at this point?
I don't recall.
Okay.
If those, I mean, I would have to revert to, if it's been 6 years, so whatever testimony was given the closest to the event, I would have to, I would be more accurate than anything I probably give now.
Okay. Did Martin ever discuss a blood clot with you?
And Michelle?
Yeah.
I
In
don't.
relation to Michelle's death?
Yeah, I don't recall if that was mentioned. It could have been, but I just remember specifically saying something about a heart defect, a heart problem.
Okay. After Michelle's death, did Martin ever talk to you about his failing health?
Yes, we had discussions about his health, yes.
When did those occur?
I think it was on more than one occasion, and it was probably as recent as a couple weeks up to several months, maybe a few months after.
Okay.
Just different, I'd see him with a cane or limping a little bit and ask him how it was doing, and he would give somewhat of a kind of a vague update that, well, it's coming along, or it's doing fine, or it's going to be okay, or just different answers at different times. It was several conversations.
Did you ever observe whether he stopped using the cane?
Yeah, he stopped using the cane.
When was that?
I don't know, because sometimes he would use it, sometimes he wouldn't, and he would just limp, and sometimes he would limp quite a bit, and other times not very much. So specifically, I don't know. It was kind of an off and on thing.
Okay. May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
I'm showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 18. It's a photograph. Do you recognize the person in that photograph?
I do.
Who do you recognize her as?
Jillian.
How did you come to know Jillian?
We first started to see her around the neighborhood after Michelle's death.
How long after?
Pretty quick, a week or two maybe. Yeah, we'd see her coming and going. She had a little Volkswagen Bug, a light-colored one, like a silverish one or a light blue or something, and so we'd see her quite a bit in that, coming and going.
Okay. Did you ever talk to Martin about her?
Yes, eventually, yeah.
What was the context of that conversation?
Well, there were many conversations. At first it was very vague, and then we learned that she was the nanny, and so we just have conversations both with Jillian and with Martin about how the kids are doing or whatnot, and then eventually, as everybody could tell, that the relationship was more than that, as to whether or not they were getting married, or just several conversations.
And when it morphed into, whether or not they were getting married, the relationship was more than just an employer and a nanny, when would you say that was?
That was, I don't know, 8, 9, 10, a year later, months later, something like that, I would suppose.
Okay.
It was quite a bit later. It wasn't within the first 2 weeks, for sure. It was, yeah, probably, 6 months to a year later.
Okay. Did you ever see Martin and Jillian doing things together on their own?
Yes, just like riding in a car or doing that kind of thing, yes.
Did you ever see them leaving for trips or anything?
Yeah, I would observe what appeared to be they would be leaving for trips, yes. There'd be clothes in the car, and they'd pack up and hop in the car and leave, and then we wouldn't see them for 2 or 3 days, so yes.
And were they leaving with the younger children?
No.
Okay. If I could have a minute, Your Honor.
May?
That's all I have right now.
Could we break for lunch at this point?
But that's what the jury would like to do.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, keep in mind my prior admonition to you. It's your duty not to form or express any opinion about the case until it's finally submitted to you for deliberation. Don't have any discussions amongst yourselves or with anyone else about the subject matter of the trial. Avoid television, radio, internet, news broadcasts. Don't do any research on your own or communicate with others using electronic media. We'll be in recess until 1:30.